Fox Carolina News special report.
Fox Carolina is breaking into programming to bring you this special report on the Alex Murdaugh bond hearing. The former Low Country attorney just made his first court appearance after being charged with the murders of his wife and son. Fox Carolina's Cody Alcorn just came out of that courtroom there in Colleton County. He joins us now live. And Cody, exactly what we thought would happen did. He pled not guilty and his bond was then denied.
I'm nervous too.
Yeah, we heard Alex Murdaugh stand up and say that he is not guilty on these 4 charges, of course, of murder and possession of a weapon, each times 2 for Paul and Maggie Murdaugh, his wife and youngest son. We are standing by for either the state or even his attorneys to come out and address the media that are outside the courtroom. But a couple of things happened inside that courtroom this morning. For one, we heard no new evidence. We thought we might get a glimpse into what the state had against him. Not all of it, but a little piece. But Alex Murdaugh's attorneys did not want that to happen. You heard Dick Harpootlian stand up and say he did not want any evidence released. He does not want this tried in the public eye. He wants this tried in a courtroom, and he is also requesting a speedy trial. He wants this trial to go by January. So he wants this case in a trial by January. The state not disagreeing, but Judge Newman says they need to look at this because there's a lot of things at play here. Is there even an open docket here in Colleton County by then? Of course, there's a lot of other things happening in this county, not just this Alex Murdaugh murder trial. They're also requesting a gag order in this case. Now, we heard Judge Newman inside the courtroom say he is not always a fan of a gag order in a case like this, but he is going to consider it. Now, this is, again, Harpootlian is one of the attorneys for Alex Murdaugh. He wants this gag order due to the fact he does not want the information leaked and his client tried in the public eye. They do not want the jury pool to be tainted here. So that's why he's trying to get this gag order put into place. The state has no objection, and you did hear Harpootlian and the state go back and forth just a little bit here because there have been some leaks in this case. Who are they coming from? No one knows. But as a journalist, that's our job, is to find information out and get it to the public, of course, as long as it's truthful information. So the thing here is Harpootlian said he did not know where these leaks are coming from, but he wanted this gag order so they could investigate any leaks that are made in this case as far as evidence against his client. Now, the state did come out and say, look, the 81 allegations against Alex Murdaugh, including white-collar crimes, the drugs, the botched attempted suicide, he wanted to look like a homicide he's charged with. They say all of that and the motive here is all to do with a motive. He said there is evidence here they found on scene, and all of those charges, 81 plus, all lead to Alex Murdaugh being the one who pulled the trigger here, according to the state. So again, those were a couple of the motions here. The big one that the judge will decide in the coming weeks, Judge Newman, is if a gag order will be put into place where no one will be able to talk about this. And Harpootlian even went a step further, saying they wanted motions to be sealed. Judge Newman wasn't really a fan of that. He said, look, that is part of the public process here, and the state agreed with the judge. So we'll see how that plays out as far as future hearings on motions. We also learned today that the state started handing over discovery evidence to Alex Murdaugh's attorneys last week. And Harpootlian, again, when he was trying to push for a speedy trial, he said this evidence was collected over 13 months. SLED and the AG's office had 13 months here to gather this evidence. They put it to a grand jury last week. That grand jury thought there was enough evidence to take this to trial, and Harpootlian says they should start getting that and have it in their hands within 2.5 weeks. He even pushed for a possible trial by October, November, but again, the judge said there's a lot of things at play here as far as when this thing could be seated for a jury and actually get a trial in motion. So those are a couple of the big motions. Other than that, not a whole lot came out in this bond hearing, Margaret, and obviously about 20 minutes into this bond hearing, Judge Newman did deny Alex Murdaugh bond. His attorneys weren't even pushing for for bond. They knew that was not going to happen here. As you remember, Judge Newman has already denied bond for Alex Murdaugh on those white-collar crimes, which include defrauding his former clients, as he was a very well-known attorney down here. For many years, he's accused of defrauding them out of over $8 million, which has led to 81 warrants signed against him. Something very interesting in that courtroom as well. As Alex Murdaugh sat inside that courtroom facing a judge and now facing 2 counts of murder. And the very back of that courtroom, hanging on the wall, is a painting of his great-grandfather, Buster Murdaugh, Jr. It's kind of ironic that this family, such a dynasty here, over 80 years, being elected to being prosecutors here, now find Alex Murdaugh sitting in a jail cell now, waiting to be taken back to Colombia, facing charges that could land him in prison the rest of his life, or even worse, could lead to the death penalty here. Again, that's something also the state will decide in the coming weeks if there are aggravating circumstances that will lead to them to request to seek the death penalty in this case. So a lot of things at play here, Margaret Ann. Right now we're just kind of standing by for a news conference. We did see Murdaugh's attorneys address us during that last bond hearing in Colombia, but Harpootli was very clear on this one, is they do not want this tried in the public.
You know, Cody, I find that so different than what we heard last fall when you interviewed his other attorney there as well. You had that exclusive interview with Murdaugh's attorney where he gave you essentially his alibi, saying that he wasn't even there. So now it almost seems like they're switching gears in what they're trying to do with this.
And that's what we all thought. But what we learned in that bond hearing was they started getting that discovery last week. And in fact, I was close to getting another interview with his defense team last week, at the end of last week. But this kind of makes sense that since they started getting some of that discovery evidence, what have they gotten that has now kept them from wanting this to be put out into the public's eye? Here's the thing. Inside that bond hearing, right before it started, a projection screen came down, and it looked like they had a projector ready to display some type of information. But Harpootli was very quick to get up and say, look, we do not want anything released today from the state. We're actually going to waive any objection to a bond here. So what do they have? I mean, SLED has been on this for 13 months. They went to a grand jury last week here in Colleton County, and 18 men and women thought there was enough evidence to put this to a trial. But again, it's not hard at a grand jury to find enough evidence to not have a reasonable doubt that this thing needs to go on, because again, the only people inside that grand jury room is the state presenting their evidence. There was not any defense there to argue anything on that. But I will tell you this, Harpootli did stand up today in front of his client and said, look, my client is not guilty. And in fact, he said Alex Murdaugh believes the real killer or killers are still out there right now, and that's why they want a speedy trial, to get him a not guilty, and so SLED will find out who killed Maggie and Paul. And Margaret Ann, I'll tell you, during the morning news, we heard 2 sound bites from Jim Griffin back in that exclusive interview I had with him in October. And, you know, Jim Griffin gave us an alibi that he was sitting by his mom's bedside, who suffers from dementia, and they were watching a game show that night, and said the housekeeper was there with them, and that he actually called his father on the way over and called some business associates as well. So that's where they're placing him that night, is at his mom's house. His attorney also told me in that interview, look, Alex Murdaugh had no motive to kill his wife, to kill his youngest son, and says from day one he was a person of interest, and they don't believe SLED looked at anyone else other than Alex Murdaugh from the very beginning.
Yeah, we've heard that from them. And you know, you mentioned a speedy trial as well, and I also heard them talk about, I believe the prosecutor had mentioned even January, but they didn't seem to agree on that. So what does speedy trial necessarily entail?
Again, that is one thing we talked to Grant Varner last week there in the afternoon on our newscast, and he said, look, yes, I'm sure the defense does want a speedy trial here because they want to catch the state off guard. They want to get this thing to trial as fast as possible because they want to be able to get that evidence, and they want to be able to defend their client. So he said that could be just a way for the defense to get an upper hand and maybe catch the state off guard in some sense. But he said it's also very unlikely this thing is going to go to trial by the end of the year because, again, how much discovery is here and how much this entails. It was a 13-month-long investigation, but we heard from the state today saying they have evidence that against Murdaugh, not only from the scene, but also just in his actions from those 81 allegations, from drug charges, defrauding, his addiction, and then, of course, that botched suicide attempt. Because we heard immediately after that, many of these experts came out and said, why would an innocent man try to take his own life, even if it was just to give his oldest son a life insurance policy? A lot of things at play here.
A lot of unanswered questions still remain, and a lot of just mystery surrounding this. I think that's why so many people are so infatuated with this case. I know that you've been following it closely. We both have, all of us here at Fox Carolina. And I want to just go back to the history of this family, because I don't know, if you're not from South Carolina, you haven't lived here a while, you may not grasp the power that this family has had on not only Hampton County, but just surrounding areas for so long. I mean, we're talking 80+ years that they've been in power.
Yeah, that's right. Hampton County, a neighboring county. This double homicide took place about 25 miles from here on the property in Moselle, a 1,700-acre hunting property. And again, the Murdaugh name is a dynasty around here. It's a very powerful name, in fact. When you talk to people about it, they really don't want to say much at all about the Murdaughs here. Of course, Alex Murdaugh, a part of that law firm, which he's been since kicked out of for stealing, according to SLED, thousands of dollars from them, actually millions. His father, great-grandfather, grandfather, all solicitors, prosecutors here. As I mentioned, his great-grandfather's painting is inside that courtroom at the very back, so it shows you just the amount of power this family had and how well respected they were in the court system here. And not to say that his great-grandfather or father, they didn't have that respect and earned it. But again, that dynasty is falling here with Alex Murdaugh, who is facing, again, 81+ charges, accused of $8.5 million of defrauding clients, and now his most serious charges, 2 counts of murder. And I should mention, he was already being held on a $7 million bond for those white-collar crimes. And the judge here, also the same judge who heard that. But yeah, looking back at this family, it's almost unfathomable to see what transpired here, but many people who knew them very closely in Hampton County and this area, some say they're not surprised.
Yeah,
it just depends on who you talk to.
Yeah, I mean, I've heard that kind of sentiment from a lot of people. I know that they're getting ready to do a press conference.
And here is Dick Harpootlian right now. And Dick, do you have any comment?
I'm gagged.
And you just heard Dick Harpootlian say he is gagged, so he is not going to be talking about this. I knew they were going to be talking with Judge Newman about that gag order. Simply said, do you have a comment? He said he's been gagged. So this motion might have been approved by Judge Newman behind closed doors here at the courthouse, but obviously we'll keep an eye on that. That motion will have to be made public at some point. So it does not look like there is going to be any news conference by Murdaugh's team, and I'd imagine the state's not going to either. If he had nothing to say, the state's definitely not going to put anything out there. They had their chance to do that in court, Margaret Ann, and they chose not to.
All right, Cody, thank you for staying on top of this, and of course we're going to have more on this at 4, 5, 6, and then of course tonight at 10 and 11. Once again, Alex Murdaugh making his first court appearance this morning in Colleton County after being charged with the murders of his own wife and son. And he pled not guilty, but bond has been denied. We believe he'll be taken back to Columbia now to the facility there. Of course, we'll be following this, and thank you for watching this special report. We'll have much more online at foxcarolina.com and later on.